In the literary analysis system, the characters are represented by four separate yet equally important groups: post-structuralism and deconstruction, feminism, post-colonial, and narratology. These are their stories. Monday, March 27th. Hector Campos Jr. is reported missing, 19 years old, a freshman engineering student at Michigan State University at Grand Rapids. Tioga County Sheriff's Department found the body in the local landfill, sporting massive injuries that may or may not have been from the trash compacting process. A complete autopsy has not been conducted yet. However, the mystery behind Campos's sudden end may yet to be discovered. I sat down with Mr. and Mrs. Campos to uncover their side of the story. Being the parents of young Hector Jr., I would assume they had much to say.
Why does he never touch me anymore? Am I ugly? Am I not sexy enough for him? Am I not being the wife he wants me to be?
Aside from the seemingly plummeting marriage, what are your other thoughts?
I think about the sex we had, and it's lost its passion. I ask myself, can I be a better wife to Hector? On top of a failing marriage, it saddens me to realize that our son is not in our lives, and that was keeping us together. I wish Hector was alive to see how things were between his father and I. There was a feeling of regret. I felt that Hector's life wouldn't be so rough if he had known his father and I were on good terms.
Hearing Mrs. Campos' side of the story, there was much more to uncover in this investigation. I spoke briefly with Mr. Campos and wanted to uncover his feelings on the loss of his son.
Losing my son was very hard. It still is. I never imagined a day without him not in his mother in my life. Even though his mother showed more affection than I did, I loved Hector very much. I just couldn't afford to do the things he aspired to do. I'm a very successful man in my field of work, but my finances are for funding his education, not his enjoyment. I think that's why sometimes Hector resented me. Miss Campbell would get mad if I didn't pay that $1,500 for his fraternity. I was against the idea, but I was against having a disappointed son and an angry wife even more.
A general sense of disunity seemed to be apparent from the parents, both seeming focused elsewhere. Mrs. Campos especially appeared to be concerned more on her marriage rather than the recent death of her son, something that fellow reporters found quite odd. Things would continue to be as such as we delved further into their relationships. Next, I continued talking to the Campos, asking my other series of questions that I had pertaining to their relationship with their son.
Hector was always a good boy. I mean, we'd argue sometimes and he'd seem distant at times, but he was always a good boy. Hector and I got along, of course, until he needed money for that damn fraternity. My wife had me pay that for him. She always babied him.
It seemed that Mrs. Campos handled Hector differently than his father. Next, I decided to ask about Hector's relationships with other peers who didn't really have much to say, and then I asked his roommates about it.
Hector was always a bit of an asshole, especially towards the girls. He was always pissed when a girl wouldn't pay too much mind to him, calling them all sorts of names. They just didn't like him because of his attitude, you know?
So it seemed Hector even had problems with his fellow peers, along with a difference in his parents' handling of him. Hector didn't seem to respect his mother too much or his fellow female peers. His father seemed to be harder on him than his mother, who seemed to be submissive to his behavior and baby him. This is what the reporters had concluded as they decided to delve further into their investigation. After questioning Hector's parents, I decided to interview his fellow fraternity brothers, the ones who had seen him last. I decided to ask why Hector was in the fraternity and if they were close.
I wouldn't say we were really close to Hector. I mean, he was awful when drunk. He also didn't like how everyone was treating him. It didn't seem to handle the fraternity life of pranks and such. I mean, it was good he was in the fraternity, at least. He was the only Latino in our fraternity, which I mean is cool because it makes us look more diverse and want others to join our fraternity, you know?
So Hector was the only Latino in a predominantly white fraternity, and they liked how he looked for their fraternity. Next, I decided to ask about Hector's drinking and the pranks they would pull on him.
Hector, man, he liked to drink, but I think it's because he wanted to feel like a man, you know? Try to keep up with some of us in the fraternity. He tried way too hard, and it kind of made him annoying, especially since he was an angry kind of drunk. As for pranks, it's the normal frat stuff, you know? He was the newbie, and he was different from us. We just did it to be funny, but he never found it funny.
So Hector wanted to fit in with his peers and didn't like how they treated him. And this led him to his drinking in excess. This seems like some interesting points, but I must continue my investigation before I can make any conclusions. The fraternity was playing the diversity card to include Hector, but overall treated him poorly to his difference in race, even though they used it to help their image. It seemed Hector tried to fit in through his peers with alcohol, but it only further alienated himself from his peers who already didn't accept him. And this opens an important part of the case that the reporters will use in the investigation, but there is still more to be found about Hector Jr.'s murder. I spoke with Hector's roommates. They didn't seem too surprised about Hector's death.
I mean, yeah, we were a little shocked about him dying, but he was always out with his so-called frat brothers. He was kind of a jerk. He was an asshole to say the least. Every time he would get drunk, it was pretty much a problem. Not something Steve and I were up to deal with. He was just too much for himself, and even anyone else.
He fucked up. I just can't imagine why you would do so much for one fraternity. Hector needed a reality check. Hector was so naive, it was sad. I just wanted to be accepted. I mean, all that shit I did for those guys, I was so sure to get in. I had no doubt in my mind that I would be a part of that fraternity.
And though the evidence is abundant and strong, the case cannot be closed with absolute certainty. This is where you, dear viewers of this program, may yet come in use. Should anyone have any information that pertains to the case of Hector Campos Jr., please call the designated hotline, 1-800-LANDFILL. Thank you.